first of all, I would like to welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Peter is stepping down as the dean after almost, a decade of leading the school. And it's such a wonderful opportunity to have this conversation with him, to reflect on some of the challenges that the school has faced, but also some of the highlights, especially, in this changing environment. And I'm absolutely more delighted because, this is our celebratory 10-year reunion as well. And as someone who is an alum, but also as an insider, have this wonderful opportunity to work with Peter over these several years. So, it's my absolute pleasure to invite him to have a conversation with him. And I'm sure, you'll also be delighted to hear, what Peter has been thinking, doing, but also what his next steps are. So first of all, welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Abrar. Pleasure to be here.
So I thought, we could start this conversation related to some of the work that I've also been doing at the school, which is around purpose. Because one of the big questions, especially when many of these things are changing around us, the business environment changing, and especially with the pandemic, this central question comes in, what is the purpose of business education? And especially, what is the purpose of this school? How are we leading the school in the next decades, but also, looking at the Oxford timelines, the next century. So I'd love to know how you're dealing with this, what's some of your thinking, what's some of the work that you've been doing around the purpose of the school?
So, Abrar, happy to start with purpose, but before we do, I just want to say thank you to you, thank you to Viola, thank you to the whole alumni team. Thank you to everybody who's up early in the morning, maybe very early if you're in the United States, or quite late somewhere else. And also to share my, really sense of support for all of our colleagues around the world who are struggling as a result of COVID-19, and especially our colleagues in India right now. But the question you asked was about purpose, and it's timely. Now I've done this for, in about a month, it's 10 years. And so I've interviewed lots and lots of people. And the worst interview not the worst. One of the harder interviews was when somebody in the middle of an interview actually pulled out a PowerPoint deck and said, let me answer that question with a PowerPoint deck. And I'm going to do the worst thing in the world here, because I'm going to answer your question, because we talked about some of these questions in advance, but also use this as an opportunity to share what the alumni, what we've been thinking about, to reflect what they've been telling us about what the purpose of the school is and should be. So at some risk, I'm going to try to see if I can do a quick share here. So this is the fundamental question. And Abrar, you yourself have been instrumental in framing this question for businesses. There's a whole set of researchers at the school who thought about purpose. Purpose is strategy, purpose is culture, the role of purpose in an aligned organization. And so how is it that we can teach about this stuff, but we don't do it? Of course, we have to ask ourselves the question why we exist. So the underlying research, and I can't help but be a professor here, and I will again be a professor. What have we been saying about this concept? Well, purpose underlies all organizational activity. So if you look at Jonathan Trevor's book on alignment, the first chapter is about purpose. Without purpose, the rest of it doesn't sit. It's the foundation on which things happen. And then purpose is not just culture. Purpose is strategy. Purpose is what motivates us, why it is we do the things that we do. And therefore, it seemed like a natural question to ask the question, what's our purpose? Now, over the last 10 years, we've articulated that in different ways. When I first arrived, we actually, if you look carefully at everything we said, we actually never said anything about purpose. We talked about educating leaders for 800 years, and we talked about a young entrepreneurial school. We avoided the question of purpose. For much of the last 10 years, we've used this convoluted statement that I wrote, to be honest, about a world-class business school community embedded in a world-class university tackling world-scale problems. No one ever liked that statement. It was too long, it was too complicated. And so a couple of years ago, we, in conjunction with the board, said, well, let's actually think about this in a more systematic way. So the journey to today, there were some initial thoughts by our senior leadership group in 2019. And then over the last year, we had broad consultation with all key stakeholder groups. And Zoom actually helped, because when we met, and you'll see some of the groups we met with, we could actually put, and you'll see a survey up in front of them, and collect immediate feedback on where they thought we should locate this purpose statement. Then we drafted a purpose statement that tried to be true to that by the senior leadership group. That's myself and my associate deans, my deputy deans, the COO of the school. I mean, these are the people who run the school. And then one by one, we all agreed that word by word, that statement reflected where we thought all those stakeholder groups were. We proposed that to the board. And today, this moment is the very first time we'll share that with any group outside the school. And I thought I'd use that. So to just put it in context, this was something that some of you may have actually responded to a Zoom quiz that looked like this. Is it about producing excellent teaching and research? Is it about the outcome being success? Is it about responsibility? Is it about impact? And should that impact be kind of big scale impact? You don't have to look at the numbers at the bottom. Needless to say, different people have different points of view. To summarize that, between 4 and 28% of all the stakeholder groups think that basically excellence and success is all we need to do. I would say that this is a kind of a 1980s version of purpose. Each level you add more. Another 2 to 8% say, yeah, that's good, but we need to add at least the concept of responsibility. So about a third of the kind of stakeholders across the board are saying, well, a statement that talks about the responsibility of the school, that's enough. But 2/3 or more, between 59 and 92% by stakeholder group, are saying, no, for this school, that's not enough. We have to have impact. And that impact, for most of them, an overwhelming majority of them, is impact at a high scale, an impact that's direct. So needless to say, there's no statement that's going to satisfy everybody. But clearly, if we don't do what the majority of our stakeholders want us to do, we're not doing our job. So here's some words, and they're only words, but, and again, this is the first time anybody will have seen these words. We at Oxford Said. This is not a statement about the faculty. It's not a statement about the students, not the alumni, not the Global Leadership Council, not the staff. This is a statement that represents all of us. And the Oxford part of Oxford Said, we're not Said Business School, we're Oxford Said. We're part of the University of Oxford. So we are committed to engage with businesses and leaders from across the world. Why businesses and leaders? Why not business leaders? Well, businesses because we're a business school, and leaders because we work in a lot of different sectors from across the world because we are unabashedly global. To do what? Well, we're going to do teaching, learning, and research. That's what we do. Those are our activities. But to what end? To collectively achieve economic prosperity, social justice, and environmental sustainability. Economic prosperity, that's what business is there to do. And if I use Colin Mayer's language around profitably meeting the needs of people and planet, that's the profitable part. So there needs to be economic prosperity, but that can't be done alone. It needs to be done in conjunction with social justice, which is treating people fairly, and environmental sustainability. So hopefully as you all look at this, you're not taken aback. You're not saying, oh, that's a silly thing to say. That's inconsistent. Some of you may think that we've gone a little bit too far. Some of you may think we haven't gone far enough. But if the vast majority of you think, if the school can do that, it's a school I'll continue to be proud of, then I think we're in a good place. And for me, and this is the reflections on 10 years, my goal was to leave this statement, not a strategy statement for my successor, not a clear, here's how you're going to do this, but a statement from the community. As we welcome you to Oxford Said, this is the community that you're joining, and this is what they'd like you to accomplish. From here, it's up to you. Anyway, it's more than a long answer to a great question, Abrar, but at least gets us started, I think, in an important way.
Well, thank you, Peter. And, it's obviously really wonderful to see. I'm also actually very proud of the statement in terms of having had some time to contribute to it from purpose, but also looking at, the environmental and the social justice side of it. And I think bringing those two aspects in are extremely important, especially, when we see the world around us. So on that very note, and I know one of your big achievements has been driving this purpose statement, and I know it's taken, significant amount of time collecting and getting data and getting everyone involved. But other than the purpose statement, what is this one thing, and I know it's a big question, that you're most proud of during your time at the business school?
So I have to report to the business school board next week, and my report is a 10-year report. So I'm prepared for this question a bit. A business school, well, let's go back to theory of change. If we're going to have the kind of impact that we're talking about, that's not going to happen through buildings. It'll happen through people and ideas. That's the theory of change. And so therefore, what am I most proud of? It must be people and ideas. So let's think about the people side. On the faculty, we had 64 faculty members in 2010. On the eve of my arrival, we had 64 faculty members. Of them, 30 are still at the school, but another 50 are new. And as I look across that roughly 80 faculty members, I'm extremely proud of them. They're doing great work. You're going to hear from some of them, some ones you've heard of from a long time, Mungo and Mark, and some that are new, yourself, Abrar, as well as Pinar. I think they're doing great work, and they're pushing the boundaries in important ways. I look at our students. 10 years ago, we had in our MBA program 22% women. Now at 47%, we have the highest in the world. We're the second highest in the world. When I look at Africa, we had 2%. We have 12%, 12 to 13% every year. I am very proud of our students. When I look at our alumni, I'm very, very proud of our alumni. When I look at our extended alumni body, which is the 25,000 people who've taken online courses with us, our reach is bigger and bigger and bigger. And as far as I can tell, all those people are committed to trying to change the world. So that's a really important thing. And then on the idea side, I'm reflecting on what are the big ideas that our colleagues have pushed forward into the world. And so, there's always a risk of identifying a couple, but I'll just do one or two. When I arrived, Colin Mayer had just stepped down. And I reflect a lot on Colin's experience as a former dean. And he reinvented himself, and Colin has become perhaps the most influential voice on corporate purpose in the world. And around him, the ownership project that a number of us are part of, or Bob Eccles' work on accounting, or Amir's work on accounting, or Richard Barker's work on IFRS. And there's a cluster of work around how we don't just kind of wave our hands around purpose, but we actually turn it into action. So that I'm extraordinarily proud of. If you look at the work that we've done in marketing in the last 10 years, the marketing group that we see at the school is completely different than the marketing group that existed 10 years ago. And the Future Marketing Initiative led by Andrew Steven has done just incredible work and really pushed a set of ideas there. On entrepreneurship, we have really, really pushed extraordinarily hard. If I think about the last 10 years, there was no creative destruction lab. There was no foundry. There was no Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business program. And our footprint was good, but it was nowhere near where it is now. If I think about the impact that we've had on financial regulation, and really the public debate around conflicts of interest in finance, it's our faculty with their voices and their ideas that have changed the world, literally changed the world. So I'm proud of people and ideas. And I think that's the right thing for a dean to be proud of. Yeah, it's great that we've done buildings. It's great that we've done some specific programs. I think it's great that we've become more embedded with the university, but to what end? The end is those people and ideas changing the world.
Thank you. And I'm also witness to some of those changes, in terms of, I think when we started the MBA, as you said, the gender parity was quite small. So having seen that rise and then seeing more representation has, obviously been fantastic. And as you said, there are many programs, but I want to go to one program that's very close to me.
Yeah.
And that's the MBA 1+1. And selfishly, I'm the academic advisor for the 1+1, but also had the opportunity to experience the university. And I know it kind of builds on your thinking of embedding yourself, the program within the MBA, but just wanted to get your thoughts on, how do you see the MBA 1+1? And then what do you see its role in the future in terms of the business school, but the wider university as well?
Yeah. So I think the MBA 1+1 program is an exemplar of where we've traveled and where we need to go. And the general proposition is we are stronger as part of a university than apart from it. And for this agenda, to create economic prosperity, social justice, and environmental sustainability, we are especially blessed by having a university. But how does that work? We have joint appointments. As you know, Abrar, we have one, and we'll hopefully soon have two joint appointments with the Smith School. We have a joint appointment with engineering, joint appointments work. But how do we give students, a sense of, more than business curriculum? Well, in GoTo, we do that because we ask our colleagues from around the university to come. But if a student really wants an immersive experience to understand a domain and then apply our business skills to that domain to solve problems, how do we do that? And that's what the 1+1 is all about. Allows you to get two, for those students who don't, or alums who don't know about it, allows you to get 2 masters over the course of 2 years. And we're extraordinarily benefited because the Pershing Square Foundation has funded a number of these scholars to study for 2 full years. Where did it come from? I was here, I arrived in July 1st of 2011. By September 2011, I proposed it to the university. And I'll confess, I didn't follow the right processes. I didn't consult with the right people, but nobody in the faculty seemed to care because as long as we were admitting the same students, they were okay. And by January of that year, we actually publicly announced it. Why is it important? I think it's important for 2 or 3 reasons. The first reason is we give students an experience that they can't otherwise get. If we want to set them up to solve environmental problems, problems in education, problems in Africa, if we want them to understand how to apply technology like AI or computer science to business to solve problems in the world, they need that domain expertise. So I hope, first and foremost, this gives those students a tremendous experience that they need. More importantly, it infuses into the school, into the student body, representatives of all those other programs who can then share with their colleagues what is going on with the rest of the university in a way to make it natural and organic. And I want to link this up to the changes in the gender parity that we've, and the, for example, geographic composition with Africa. If women are 22% of the class, men can ignore them. If Africans are 2% of the class, everybody else can ignore them. So what we need to do is to bring other kinds of voices into the class. And that could be women, it could be Africans, but in this case, it's people who intimately understand other parts of the university so that the rest of the student body benefits from their experience. So that other departments don't see us as foreign, so that we don't see them as foreign. And so I think it's a tremendous program. It's one that I'm really proud of, in my list of things that I am very proud of. That's very high on the list. And by the way, I should say, thank you, Abrar, because I know that you've taken, the care and feeding of the 1+1s under your kind of responsibility, and I'm really grateful for that.
But if we move on, I think this is a question that comes in from, from many people. It's looking at the future of the business school, and generally the environment that we are in. As I said, with digital coming in, with many things changing around you, and I do recognize, in your tenure, you've probably experienced something that's very unique. It's the whole environment around the business school and the business education change. So, what do you see the big challenges for business education, and especially what do you think the school is doing to address those challenges, but also positioning itself as a school of the future?
So I'm breaking into the hows and whys. And the how is, how do we deliver education? Again, 10 years ago, it was all face-to-face. It was under fairly strict university guidelines. And what we've done, I think, are in 2 directions. One, develop a really robust co-curricula that's alongside of the assessed curriculum. As great as that assessed curriculum is, the rules and regulations of Oxford remain incredibly restrictive. And so therefore, be able to kind of expand the scope of what we do through a set of co-curricular activities like CDL, like the Venture Lab, like the Impact Lab that school does, all that. So that's one little piece of it. The second how it's different is digital. We've pushed incredibly hard before COVID on digital. So we had launched, and sometimes we use ExecEd as a launch pad for stuff. first in custom and then, clearly in open, where we now have 20 different programs and 25,000 different people. So we were developing digital muscles well before COVID hit, and that served us well. Those experiments, what we've done with the Hive, have shown us in the last year that we can combine. It's not an either or, digital or face-to-face, it's an and. How do we do the best of what we can do in Oxford with digital materials, whether synchronous or asynchronous? And I think that how is, at this point, pretty clear that we're going to have to combine a variety of different pedagogies and a variety of different approaches. That's the how. I don't think that's nearly enough. I wrote a piece in the Business History Review. It was covered by Andrew Hill last week in the FT. I actually think that the bigger question is not the how, which is what most business schools are worried about, but the why. To put it in the simplest possible terms, the world is asking business to do more than it's ever asked it to do in the past. So if I were to interview an CEO, they'd explain that they have to not only make profits and satisfy shareholders, but they do have this broader agenda, and call it a stakeholder agenda and stakeholder capitalism if you want. Use the language of the Business Roundtable, use the language of lots of different organizations. But I think there's no question that we've gone beyond platitudes that CEOs can say to explain why they should have a license to operate. Business schools simply serve business. And if business is required to do all that, business schools will too. That's why this statement, to be honest, isn't strong enough for me. I would have talked about economic, social, and planetary justice, but that's maybe a step too far. And I think that if we're going to be partners with business as they're moving forward, we have to be at that cutting edge. And that cutting edge right now are these responsibilities, along with technology. And, we've done great stuff and are continuing to do great stuff with AI. But if all we're doing is the how, and I'd written a piece about 7 years ago, business schools have to be more than driving schools. We actually have to not only explain to people how you drive the car, but also where you're going. And so that's what I think the future looks like. And I hope that we stay at the front of that future, because when we started talking about this stuff 10 years ago, it was a little bit lonely. Most of the other major business schools were not talking about it. They're now kind of getting closer, and we need to continue to go out in front.
With these challenges, and as you said, with the landscape changing as well, what role do you think the alumni community can play in the future of business? How do you see them getting more involved in the school?
So alumni play incredibly important roles. In some sense, there are eyes and ears in the business world. You're seeing on a daily basis what's going on. And one thing you can do is to communicate that back to us as a school, communicate to your faculty, communicate to my successor as a dean, communicate to everybody. What's the world look like in India? What's the world look like in Nigeria? What's the world look like in, Colombia or, Manhattan? So be our eyes and ears. Secondly, to the extent that we have important ideas, be our ambassadors. Help propagate those ideas, plant those seeds around the world. Also, help us grow and nurture this community. Send us great talent who should be studying at the business school, whether in our degree programs or exec ed, and then welcome them back. And I know there's an active set of chapters in the world, and I imagine that most of them have not been physically active or face-to-face active, but in time, welcome people back. So do all those things, be research sites for us. But I can't, and I have never hesitated in being clear about this. The school, fundamentally, if you want to ask what our competitive disadvantage is not only young, but quite honestly, we have no financial resources. We basically live on an income model. So to the extent that you want the school to do more, to offer more scholarships, to do more research programs, then I think you have to financially support the school too. So support us intellectually, support us with your human capital, support us with your financial capital, and we'll support you.
Positive challenge for the alumni as well. And maybe this is also, a reflection piece. When you think back to when you began your time at the school, what advice would you give yourself as the new dean?
So I'm cleaning out my offices, home and work right now, and I have all my papers from 2010. I was so incredibly naive. In fact, I'd be hesitant to give me any advice because I was so stupid. I was so unaware that it's amazing that I'm still here. So I guess the advice that I would have given me, and as I think about those early days, is just stick with it. Because you'll make mistakes. I am by nature an innovator. I've set up an entrepreneurial firm, a couple of them in the United States. One failed, one succeeded. As my staff will tell you, I have lots of wacky ideas, some of which should never see the light of day. I believe in innovation, and innovation means you have to accept failure. And so I guess the advice I would have given myself was, some things will work, some things won't. Just keep moving. Or I think there's a Disney movie that just says "keep on swimming" or something like that. So, and so I think that's not a bad advice. But keep sight of why you're here, and why I came to Oxford and why I'm still at Oxford is, and maybe I wouldn't have said this mission statement exactly that way, but I see that institutions like Oxford have a responsibility to the world. That of course, we have a responsibility to our students and to our faculty and to our staff and to our alumni. But institutions like ours are special and they have a responsibility to the world, and never lose sight of that. Because when you lose sight of that, then you become the same as everybody else. When you lose sight of that, then, the day-to-day will overwhelm the purpose of the organization.
And on that note, as your time is coming to an end, and really looking forward to your legacy as well, what's the conversation that you're planning to have with, the new dean? What would be that one thing that you would really like, for the new dean to continue at the school beyond your departure?
So it would be tempting to talk about specifics, but the thing about leadership is that you have to trust the leader to do what they want to do, and the selection process will pick somebody who has both capabilities and values. I think, all I would say is that this is a remarkable community, a community of, faculty and staff, students and alumni, friends and supporters, in a remarkable university. And you use that to the best of your ability in order to solve the problems of the world, while also making sure that students get great jobs and alumni are well and faculty feel well treated. And that is a privilege that very few people in the world will have. So I would just try to make them feel great about, as they should, the opportunity they have. This is the best job in the world, no question about it.
But one of the big questions that everyone wants to really know, and from a personal perspective, what are your plans for the future? What's happening next for you?
Well, let me just start. I've been an academic for 33 years. I have never taken a sabbatical. For those of you who know academia, this is a remarkably stupid thing. So normally you get a year off every 7. So I've never taken a sabbatical. I've never taken a term off in 33 years. So I have a year off next year. I'll be on sabbatical. I'm going to be doing research on 2 areas. One is the area that I have historically done a lot of work on, which is on household finance. So in fact, I've reassembled my old research team, and they're now spread out across the world. In fact, my old RA is now not just a professor, but a tenured professor at the Harvard Kennedy School. So our research team is back together, and we're looking at things like the child care tax credit. We're looking at financial fragility. Sadly, that research agenda and the problems that families face has not gone away. So I'd say half my time I'll spend thinking about, well, let's say a little bit less than half. Let's say 40% of my time I'll spend thinking about issues around household finance. The other 40% I'm going to spend on a new body of research that I've just started in the last few years. And I've kind of challenged myself by actually getting certified in this area, which is on climate finance. I think that, I'm a financial engineer by training. How do we use the tools of finance in order to advance issues around climate? So substantively, these are the 2 areas. So where's the other 20%? And I guess I'm just doing the intellectual part. I've got to figure out in the next year what I want to do with my life. And I start with a really simple question. So I set up, 20 years ago, I set up a social enterprise to move things forward on the household finance space. I'm very proud of the work that we've done. It wasn't the normal thing for, at that time, a Harvard Business School professor to do, to set up a social enterprise instead of a hedge fund. But that's what I did. I want to take some time to think about how I can be most useful. I am an Oxford professor, and so I'm just on sabbatical for the year. But what happens after the year, I don't honestly know. Here's what I can tell you. COVID permitting, I'm going to the beach for a few weeks with my family. I'm going to spend some time next year seeing family members and friends that I haven't seen a lot, certainly in the last 14 months, and to be honest, the last 10 years. As the staff will, I think, fairly say, I've been pretty much all in this job for the last 10 years. So I have some debts to pay to family and friends. So there's that. Promised my wife I would relax a little bit. But intellectually, I'm going to be thinking about those three things: household finance, climate finance, and how am I most useful? What's my theory of change? And how do I move something forward?
So, Peter, I see a very nice purpose statement, a personal purpose statement coming out with all these elements. And as you said, really thinking about the larger purpose of the organization is important, but it's also about your personal purpose and how does that align with some of the work. And that's something that really strongly came out. And I recognize it's not easy, but I think you have some really interesting building blocks, and I love to see climate emergency and finance in it. So I hope we will continue to work on that. Maybe I'll squeeze in one more question on a light, because I think we've touched on some really important things, but just thinking about one of the things that we've loved at the business school is so many extraordinary people have come in the business school, and from last year we had President, Vice President Al Gore talk about climate emergency, but we've also had some celebrities come in as well, members of the royal family as well. And so when you reflect back, could you kind of pick one of your dream speakers? It could be someone who's dead, alive, or someone that you've experienced. Who would you really want to speak to at the school and maybe have the opportunity to talk?
So I've been taking a lot of time reading history, and maybe this is personal. I see myself as a very imperfect leader. Actually, in many ways, a really bad one. But some people who have been unlikely or imperfect leaders have done remarkable things. And I've been reading about them. Who are the people who are fundamentally flawed, but somehow were kind of asked to take on a leadership role in an interesting time and did things that you wouldn't expect. Lyndon Johnson, for example. Not that Lyndon Johnson would be at the top of my list, but the Great Society programs in America, he's the most unlikely person to have created them. But the other one that I've been reading about is Abraham Lincoln. We all think of Lincoln as this iconic character. He had so many problems. And I don't think I'd want to interview him in front of an audience on stage. But it'd be really interesting, as you read, a deeply divided country facing, the biggest systemic issue of his day, coming from nowhere. If you look at his political base, he wasn't politically connected. He was surrounded by rivals who were much stronger than he was, but somehow he weaved them together in order to kind of do something that was truly important. And it was painful for him, personally and professionally. I'd really be curious to understand who that man was. And so there are many other business leaders and others, and you can go further back, and there are women and men and all kinds of folks. But this notion of imperfect leadership, boy, does it resonate with me. People who think they're perfect leaders, I don't know who they are, but so how does somebody so imperfect, so flawed, so challenged do so much? I think that'd be interesting to understand. So that's my pick.
I think it makes for a perfect research project as well. So knowing and learning from the imperfect leader, and on those really, I would say, thoughtful words, I'd love to conclude this. As I said, many other questions, and I can imagine, and I'm sure, we would have that opportunity. I can imagine, being in the Nelson Mandela theater, and then, everyone coming in and clapping and, giving you a real big round of applause for, not just this session, but, leading the school for over 10 years. And as I said, experiencing many challenges, but some really wonderful legacies and success. So Peter, I'm sure everyone's giving you a virtual clap, but I really want to thank you. As I said, personally, as an insider, as an alum, in looking at how the school has progressed. And I said, nothing is perfect. As you said, there are many imperfections, and I think that's the beauty of being a leader of school as well, where you can always, as an alumni, come in and contribute, and even have the opportunity to criticize some of those things, because I think that's how improvements happen. So having looked at the journey of the school, through your leadership, having had the opportunity to work with you on some of these big ideas, but also hopefully taking some of your legacy forward in terms of the programs that you've set up. So I wish you all the best. I hope we get to see you more in Oxford as well as you in your thinking journey, and we have an opportunity to stop you and ask you what you're doing. But best of luck on your sabbatical, much deserved sabbatical, on these big issues. And I'm sure this is not the last that we'll hear from you, and I'm sure you have many more contributions for the business school, for this world, and generally for our alumni. So thank you so much for this time. I wish you all the best.